Jaime. Mr. State.
Jaime. Okay, where are you joining us from, Jaime?
From Soledad.
From Soledad.
Soledad. Awesome. And then I'm going to jump to the other side of the room. I think at the very corner, someone by the window. Yeah.
Hi, Jazmine. I'm William. I'm from Gilroy.
William from Gilroy.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is exciting. And before I get started, I just kind of want to explain why I'm not there in person. It's my father's 60th birthday, and so we came to San Diego Zoo to celebrate his birthday. And so we're out here. But I find that preparing the next generation is so important, because when we go on sort of searching for candidates, I always get asked, how can we go out and reach a diverse audience? And I thought a lot about this, and I thought, are we not going out to the right venues? Are we not promoting our jobs the right way? And what I always come back to is that we have to prepare the next generation in order to have candidates that are diverse and that our programs are inclusive, by being able to prepare the next generation and inspire this interest, because a lot of times students like myself don't realize that there's these different job opportunities, and that you can sort of mix your life passions, and that whatever your life passions are, there's a job for that. So with that, we'll get started with the presentation. Kind of going along with that theme, growing up, I had a strong passion in agriculture. My mother worked as a raspberry picker, and my father had a ranch with cows. And so I remember we would always go out to the ranch and just sort of herd the cows in. I would go out and help my mother in the agriculture fields and the raspberries, harvesting raspberries. But I also had a strong interest for the ocean, though I must admit I don't know how to swim. And so with that in mind, I always saw these as sort of two separate worlds: my interest in agriculture and my interest in the ocean. And as I started to sort of dive into my career, I started from being in the Future Farmers of America, or FFA, in high school, and then going on into college. And I started to realize these worlds are actually very interconnected, and there's definitely lots of possibilities of careers within these realms. And the other thing that I realized is that, wow, we really are leading a lot of the work globally, locally. So a lot of the work we California leads as global leaders, and a lot of it is being done in our local areas. And I think that's one of the things that, especially, I recently joined an ag knowledge program that provides professional development to ag adjacent professionals. And that's one of the things that I realized, that as we're working our way around Monterey County, from North County to South County, there's so much innovative work, and that's great that we have that sort of locally. So as I dive into this presentation, I'll kind of take it with that approach. And first, I always like to start my presentations with sort of this eye view, because this bird's eye view, this really sort of showcases the very strong nexus and connection between our watersheds, our land, and our ocean. And here in the Monterey Bay area, I know I heard that there was sort of some schools from Soledad and others from Gilroy. These were all areas that I was raised in. I was born in Watsonville, and here we see Pajaro Valley. We moved a lot during my childhood, so I went to 4 different elementary schools, which included Watsonville, Castroville, then moved over to Gilroy, and we finally ended up in Bakersfield. And so one of the things is that it doesn't matter where we're at, we're always located in a watershed. And often, especially for the coastal areas, these watersheds drain out into the ocean. So as we can see here, this is the Watsonville, this is Watsonville area by Pajaro. And we have this great river that kind of flows through this very agriculturally important valley, Pajaro Valley. And what we see is, if you were to look a little bit closer, you would see that there's sort of, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's sort of these patches of white, some that look silver, all of which hold plastic. All of this area is completely covered by plastic. But what we might not realize is that some of the other fields here that appear to be green, whether they have strawberries or veggies, these also have plastic. And so that was kind of where we start our journey, where we recognize that there's this abundance of water that flows through these systems and it eventually drains out into the ocean. In this case, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And along the way, it carries plastic that's escaping from these agriculture fields. So with that, we'll kind of take a zoom out and learn about why this is so important for us. So one is, this is based on a National Marine Sanctuary system. And, oh no, I West Coast region, I meant to say the West Coast. So we have here the West Coast, and what's really important about the West Coast is that it's an area that's really highly protected compared to some of our other coasts. As you can see, there are currently 4 different national marine sanctuaries just within the West Coast. You have Greater Fairlawns, Cordell Banks, Monterey Bay, which all of you are sitting adjacent to, and Channel Islands. And then we also have another marine sanctuary that's going to be, it's in the process of designation, and it's the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. So really, these are federally protected marine areas that are of important significance from both cultural resource perspective. And we invite a lot of, the communities to come and explore these, but we also like to work with inland communities and helping protect the water that drains out into these sanctuaries. And we'll zoom in again back into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. This sanctuary expands over 10 major watersheds. So you have 10 major watersheds that are draining out here. What's really important to note is that for our Pájaro and our Gilroy and Soledad schools, we sit within 2 major watersheds that are really important because they are agricultural hotspots. So one of the major industries in this area is agriculture. And so you have the Pájaro River and the Salinas River that both drain out into the sanctuary. Within this area, it also houses about 3 million people, which within 50 miles of the coast. So again, very culturally important industry is agricultural industry is very important in here, and it leads in many ways. And before I go there, the other thing I want to mention is for the past 30 plus years, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary has been the only sanctuary across the nation that has a water quality program. And what's even more significant is that it has been the only sanctuary that has a program that works directly with agricultural stakeholders. And this is going to play a very key role in the projects that we'll be talking about here in a second. And of course, a lot of people have heard of, just of plastic out in the ocean. In 2019, Choi and team from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute published an article that kind of made news all around that really, one of the major things that they found was that microplastics were not just floating at the surface and were not just sinking down to the ocean, but they were really just flowing throughout the water column. And so you have sort of these very abundant number of plastic that can be found throughout the entire water column. And again, when we started to work with collaborators 30 years ago, there was different areas of work. So there's areas of work focused on pesticides, focused on runoff. In this particular area, we focus on plasticulture. So plasticulture is, for those that don't know, it's the term coined for plastic used in agricultural fields, whether they're covered or in open spaces. So this could be all the plastic that's used in greenhouses. If we're looking at a strawberry field, this is the black mulch. So this thin film, in industry it's called mulch. So that's a type of agricultural plastic. Then also often most of these beds are also have drip tape, which is the irrigation system. A lot of strawberries have moved from having sprinkler irrigation to now having drip tape. And the idea, the vision, is that we would like to achieve a state where there is proper disposal and some sort of circular economy where this plastic can come out, potentially be recycled back into agricultural plastic, and then used out in the field. What we don't want to see is having this plastic escaping out from the agriculture fields and ending up in our oceans. And again, we work really closely to look at end-of-life solutions, from one, looking at alternatives to also looking at recycling programs, and that's what we'll be covering here. But one of the questions that we get often is, well, how do you know that this plastic is escaping, and how is this plastic escaping? And so in 2019, my colleague Sam Crone started with an assessment. And so in this assessment, they looked at how the plastic was escaping, and what they found is that the plastic was escaping sort of in two ways. One, that it was escaping through flow. So if there was rain and some of that plastic pieces can be cut just even by people walking. Some of the pieces can break down. If you have mechanical tear, if you have like a tractor passing through the beds, that can create rip of the plastic. You have some of this runoff that's occurring just by having it flow out into the water, creeks or rivers that eventually drain out into the ocean. And then on top of that, you also have this plastic that is escaping through wind. So of course you have sort of these very windy areas, coastal areas. So some of this plastic is escaping, especially when you have in some areas only a sand dune that's separating the ocean from the agricultural fields. Another interesting thing that we saw was earlier this year, some of you may be familiar, there were very strong storms. And so in this particular image, if you kind of look towards the top, you'll see this juicy chocolate milk. So this is all runoff coming out from the Salinas River. And as we were taking sort of a walk in here, we saw that there was also a lot of plastic. In this particular case, we're covering waste from agriculture, but in this beach, we saw anywhere from refrigerators, dead deer, there was TVs, there was lots of tires, but we also found this ag plastic, and so we also saw a lot of this plastic escaping from that strong storm. And when we go out in our missions, we also find agricultural plastic. And so some of this plastic, we send it out to get it confirmed with FTIR, which is sort of this chemical fingerprint, where we can get confirmation that this is in fact ag plastic. And then in this other image, you can't see it from here, but when we were out in the boat, and this plastic flipped, you could see that it's sort of a silver. So that again just shows us that it's plastic mulch. That's a common plastic used, black and silver, they call it in agriculture. But it wasn't enough to have sort of these observations or anecdotal observations. The team also went out and did bank surveys. So we went out to 10 different agricultural ditches and took samples both from the banks and from the water and had those assessed to look for ag plastic. And so what we found in here is that 81% of the plastic we found was plastic mulch. Again, plastic mulch is that thin film that covers the strawberry beds. And then we also did an assessment, and I didn't include the graphs in here, but we looked at plastic used by weight. And what we found was that drip tape was the #1 plastic used in weight. There's many different kinds of plastic that is used in agriculture fields, from the film used to cover the strawberry beds, the drip tape used for in or on-bed irrigation. But then we also see that there's like strapping tape. So this would be sort of the the plastic that is used to ensure that the boxes aren't falling off when they're transferring them over to a cooler. Or also you will see that oftentimes agricultural fields are sort of fenced around with plastic to avoid some of that dust from coming into the plants. And then during COVID, this particular study happened in 2019, 2020. And so this was the COVID year, or COVID years. And so during that time, we also saw a lot of personal protective equipment that was being used. So for us, that sort of signaled the top two plastics that we wanted to focus on was going to be drip tape, just because of the amount of drip tape that was being used, and mulch because of the amount of plastic that we were seeing escaping into the banks. And one of the things that we again, we started with mulch, but one of the things that we really early on recognized is that agricultural plastic plays very important roles. And so one, it helps with ensuring that from an environmental perspective, it helps to ensure that we're not using as many agrochemicals. So because you have this plastic film and the drip tape, we have seen less use of agrochemicals. You also have more efficient water use, so you don't have to use as much water. That's very important, especially during drought years. And then on top of that, from a food security point of view, and when I say food security, I'm talking about just ensuring that the world is fed. From a food security point of view, the way that our society is built, we're able to produce the food. Again, Salinas Valley and Pajaro Valley are agriculturally really important areas that produce food that feed different areas around the world. So to ensure that the food that the growers need to produce to feed the world is happening, this plastic takes a very important role in that. And then for food safety, so this is ensuring that the food that we're eating is safe to consume. It's also a requirement in some cases to have the strawberries, for example, not touch the soil. And so that's really important, not only because consumers probably wouldn't want to eat an ugly strawberry, but also it helps. It's one of the requirements that the strawberry cannot touch the soil. So because of this, it's not fair to simply come out and say, don't use plastic in your agricultural fields, and then not have any alternative solutions. So instead, we take an approach where we say we recognize how important the plastic is. Let's try to look at different end-of-life solutions and how can we work together to find these and move forward in that way. And through this journey, we've worked really closely with high school students. We worked closely with college students, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we'll jump into one of the end-of-life solutions that we've been working on. So one of them is we have been looking at soil biodegradable mulch. And so we're currently in this national project that's along Washington, California, Florida, Nebraska, and we're the leads for California. So unlike any of the other sites, we're actually working in a commercial field, and we have been trialing biodegradable mulch. So for those that are not familiar, this is an alternative to polyethylene mulch, which these beds that you see here in green, those are sort of your industry standard beds. Polyethylene mulch is used, but this plastic is not currently recyclable nor biodegradable. And the beds that you see here in the middle with the blue, yellow, orange, and red flags, these are our initial trials that we did our very first year back in 2021, where we looked at this biodegradable mulch. The technology with this plastic is that at the end of the season, or throughout the season, this plastic is breaking down a little bit throughout the year, and then at the end of the season, you till it into the soil, and it biodegrades within 2 years, 90%. And so a lot of times we get asked, well, is this going to create additional microplastics? And the answer is yes, because the plastic is biodegrading, so it does create microplastics. But really, the real question is the residency time. So how long is this plastic going to last in the soil? And so the answer to that is ideally, or according to the test that it has to meet, It's 2 years until it biodegrades to 90%. The remaining 10% is believed to remain or to be consumed by the bacteria or organisms in the soil. As we're doing these trials with the biodegradable mulch, we start to see different challenges. So again, we're working really closely with agricultural stakeholders, and some of them are that one, it's not approved for organic operations yet. And second is that, especially for the Monterey area, this plastic needs to biodegrade fast because you have a lot of co-rotation where you have strawberries followed by veggies, oftentimes lettuces, and lettuces are packaged in the fields. And no one wants to be eating a lettuce with a piece of plastic in it, even if it's a biodegradable. And you may say, well, why does that matter? And why should this matter to an elementary child or a middle school child? And the question is, these are questions that come along, and you know, we're working on it, but there's going to be challenges that occur along the way, and we want to motivate our students, our next generation, to be interested in these type of projects. And especially in agriculture, one of the things that I often hear is that, you know, oftentimes we tell our generation, oh, if you behave bad or if you're not doing what's right, you're going to end up like your parents working in the fields. And now we're creating this negative connotation of working in agriculture. But the reality is that, one, we work really closely with our agricultural stakeholders. There's an abundance of careers that can really lead to a meaningful and successful professional journey. And two is that everyone plays a really important role in finding these different solutions. So really trying to inspire and motivate our students to say there's a lot of really cool work that is being done locally and across California. I think it's just really great for students to have a sneak peek into that. And so, again, different challenges, and we're working on them, but it's also great to inspire the next generation. The second is, I mentioned that we were working with drip tape. And so we go out into the field and we did an assessment and realized that for drip tape, there was actually existing recycling opportunities, but a lot of growers and agricultural stakeholders didn't realize that these opportunities were in place. And so what we did is we did a series of outreach events where we started to promote these opportunities. And we summarized them. So we created sort of a summary of the different recycling opportunities that are manufacturer-led. And so we were able to do this both in English and Spanish, share them out with different stakeholders. And again, as we were working with this, we realized, well, these opportunities are really sort of aimed towards some of the larger growers. This leaves behind some of the smaller growers that, for example, may be coming out from the ALBA program or maybe family farms. And the reason that they're not able to participate in these programs is that, as you can see, most of these programs require 20,000 pounds of minimum pickup of drip tape from the fields in order to recycle that plastic. And so what we wanted to do was, how can we help in making sure that all growers, since there are end-of-life solutions and there is a demand for this plastic, how can we ensure that all growers can participate in this recycling program? And so we partnered up with Regen. We partnered up with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which I work with, and then we also partnered with Flipping Iron, a technical service provider, and together we created this program that during the first stage, during the pilot program, it was free. We wanted to ensure that this would work to recycle drip tape and hoop house. And during the pilot stage, if growers brought their drip tape, they had to register, separate the plastic, they could bring in the drip tape, and it could be recycled for free. Now we're happy to announce that that program has been permanent, and so we were able to strike a deal of having that plastic, the tipping fee for this, instead of having it be like $110, it is now only $55 for growers to deliver this drip tape. It could be delivered in a mega roll, or it could be delivered at like what they call here spaghetti, and that plastic goes out for recycling. And one of the great ways, again, sometimes we don't realize, but there's different career opportunities. I'll kind of highlight here with the role that the region, the Monterey Waste Management Center has done. And their director of operations was able to work with us in using their baler. So what we see here is this giant baler, and you can see the bells down here. In this particular images, it's not with drip tape, it's with urban waste, but it's the same that's happening for the drip tape, where you create these bells, and then now you're able to transport them efficiently. These are the end results. You're able to transport them efficiently so that they can be recycled. Another question that we get is, well, recycling tends to also have a negative connotation. And, you know, you often hear, well, there's only 10% of material that's being recycled. And while all of that can hold true, this is separate, right? Because in this case, this material is not mixed, so this is not urban waste. You only have drip tape, so you have a pretty desirable feedstock that you know what the source is of this feedstock, and it's a homogeneous feedstock more than anything. So you're able to recycle this without having to do a separation of materials. And when working with Region, again, there's a series of different professionals that we work with here, from the marketing team that helped us put together the program to the director of operations that is constantly working with us to look at different end-of-life solutions. One of the challenges that we recognized, as we mentioned earlier, was the plastic mulch. So here we see, this is again in Monterey, and you have all of this plastic going out. And just for a size comparison, here is, you know, one of these waste trucks, and you could really just imagine that these are really big, astronomical piles of plastic mulch that comes in every year. And this is connected with the ocean because not only is it so close to it, but you also have a lot of seabirds that can come out, gulls that come out into this area. And so for them, it was of interest to work with us. But we also, not only did we want to focus on the drip tape, but we also wanted to look at end-of-life solutions for the mulch. And so, again, it was a unique opportunity for us to be able to collaborate with different stakeholders. And this is where I really emphasize that, especially for students, you know, whatever it is that their interest is in, even if they have sort of in their minds two different interests that they might think, I have to choose one or the other, you can often find an area where there's compatibility between the two, and you can make a career out of that. And so for this project, we looked at working with different organizations. So we're working with Driscoll's, NatureWise, Cal Giant, Alba, which are all, well, Driscoll's, NatureWise, Cal Giant, Alba, Good Farms are berry brands, but then we also are working with Alba that provides a program for people that want to start their own farming business, and oftentimes it's people that have worked in the fields and now are ready to sort of go on their own journey and starting a farm. So we work with them on this new project. Some of the other partners that we have in here is Andros. This is an engineering firm. If you have any students interested in engineering, there's a lot of engineering happening in agriculture that could benefit the ocean. We're also working with academia, so Washington State University, who's leading our economics team. People are interested in understanding finances and the costs associated with practices. We have a spot for you. And we're also working with Cal Poly, who's doing a lot of our soil science projects. Sea Grants also works really closely with marine conservation communication. And of course, us, TMSF and the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. In this project, we're looking at a technology that can help process the plastic when it comes out of the field. And that's because this plastic comes out very highly contaminated, and we're not able to recycle it because of how much dirt gets stuck into this plastic. So what we're doing in this project is, one is we are working with a technology to be able to mechanically collect mulch, which may sound easy, but it's not. And so the engineers have worked really closely in sort of perfecting this technique to mechanically collect the plastic. We go out and we ensure that this technique actually helps in collecting more plastic, and we do that by doing soil assessments. So we go out and we look to see how much plastic is left behind. And then once that plastic is collected, they take it out to this processing line, and this is what the research is really covering, what the grant is funding, which is this processing line that uses a dry system, which is really unique. And in this, the engineers are leading globally through this project. We're leading globally because no one else has been able to reduce contamination using a dry system. In other areas where you see this happening, they're using water to sort of pressure wash this, and in other countries they even have people washing the plastic by hand. So in here it's a dry system. You're able to reduce that contamination. And then the plastic gets spelled. By the time it gets spelled, you have a reduction of 50 to 80% contamination reduction, and you've increased plastic yield. So now you're able to mechanically recycle this plastic, which hadn't been possible before. And now through this project and through this very strong collaboration, different minds, different professionals, we have been able to achieve this. And this is our year one of our project. It's a 3-year project ending in 2026. And so with that, I'll leave some space for opening for questions. But one of the other things that I want to comment on is just acknowledging all the participation that we've had and the different funding sources. And in this, I think it's also important to highlight all the different groups. Again, there's different career opportunities for students to be part of, but also for them to realize that there's this entire team that's working in end-of-life solutions, innovative solutions locally in this area. And most importantly, we cannot do this work without the strong collaboration of the growers. And in here we have very important growers, female growers, Asian growers, Hispanic growers that have been playing a very important role and continue to work closely with us in moving these solutions forward. So with that, I have my email here in case anybody wants to follow up with separate questions, but I'm also happy to open it up to any questions people may have in the room. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can go back to seeing you all.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Go for it.
I have a question about topsoil erosion. I'm assuming that the plastic mulch reduces that, but then the last slide when they're pulling it all off, is it actually like a net zero? Is it actually net zero on the soil? Like, is anybody looking at the quantity of soil that's being lost using mulch?
Okay, so I think I'll try and capture. So does the use of the biodegradable mulch, do you see an increase in topsoil erosion? I'm just trying to say
More with the recycling, I think.
Yeah, like I'm assuming the mulch prevents erosion.
Yep.
Initially,
Right,
but
when
then
you
when
pick
you
it up.
remove it, you're taking all that soil off
Yep.
the field. So does it increase it in the end?
Yep. Jasmine, did you hear that question?
So I think what I heard was from you, Corin, was if the biodegradable mulch specifically, so the one that gets tilled into the soil, if that results in...
I think I said it wrong. Let me try it one more time. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. So the purpose of the plastic mulch initially is to reduce erosion of the soil, but then when you remove it, it can potentially increase erosion because of pulling off the plastic and the dirt that comes with it. So how does the installation and removal impact topsoil erosion? Does that make sense?
Yes, and so I'll say there's 2 projects, right? The biodegradable mulch, that one, it does break a little bit on the bed, but what's important to note is that by the time that it's breaking down, your strawberry plants are at sort of their full capacity, so they're covering most of the bed, which helps with that erosion, or preventing that erosion. And then at the end of the season, you till it in. So unlike when you remove the plastic, you're not removing that topsoil, which usually if you're like in the recycling project, for example, that one, the plastic gets removed, and that one does remove a lot of that topsoil. And this is usually the healthiest soil that the growers have. So we're looking at strategies for the recycling, not for the biodegradable, but for the recycling, to be able to loosen that soil so that it stays behind. In the case of the biodegradable mulch, you don't lose it at the end because you're not removing the plastic, you're tilling it in. And during the season, because this plastic helps with weed prevention, it doesn't break completely. So for example, in our monitoring, that plastic was breaking down to about 30% breakdown. So you still have a lot of that plastic left in there. And then on top of that, you have the full extent of the plant, which also helps in that soil erosion.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, I was just going to say that whoever asked that question makes me realize that I didn't mention one of the things that we heard from the growers is their unicorn, right? What would be ideal would be for this plastic to not break up at all during the season. And because there is that 2-week co-rotation, so usually once the plastic or once a strawberry field is ready and they lift it, they have about 2 weeks to prepare before the next grower comes in. And so their unicorn would be that you have this plastic last intact the whole season and that it breaks down in 2 weeks. We're not there yet, but that is one of the goals that the growers would like to see.
That was a great question. Other questions?
So. Thanks, Jazz. We're in the Central Valley, so are we heading upstream? Are we heading upriver and working with the Central Valley growers? Because we had a lot of rain this past year and it flooded everywhere, pulling all that contaminants, plastic, everything all the way down the river to our oceans. So are you partnering upriver as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because our focus so far has been coastal, just because we have this, our funding is coming from NOAA and our organization works directly with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. However, we started to partner with the Nature Conservancy. And so, and I'm from Bakersfield, so I just came from there this morning. And so in the Central Valley, there's of course a lot of plastic that's used as well. For the Central Valley, the number one plastic use is drip tape. And so what we have been trying to work with is, one, promoting the end-of-life options for drip tape. You have a lot of sort of the almonds and pistachio fields occurring in that area. So the programs that we promote for the Central Valley, for California Central Coast, those are also available for the Central Valley. So we have started to share those resources so that growers are aware of these recycling opportunities. And then beyond that, we recognize that the challenges is not just with the coastal agriculture, but plastic is used everywhere around the United States. So not only are we collaborating with the Nature Conservancy in order to kind of bring some of these solutions and be able to spread the word of what opportunities are available across the state, but we're also starting a new partnership with plastic manufacturers. So we're partnering up with the 4 major drip tape manufacturers across the United States. Well, their headquarters is in Israel, but they have a very strong focus across the United States. So we're partnering with them to look at how can we work together to ensure that these recycling opportunities are not only available here in California, but across the United States. There's efforts to expand these out into Florida, for example, but right now they're not widely available. And so not only do we want to make sure that as we collaborate and share and spread the word, not only do we want to spread it to the Central Valley, but even across the state or across the United States, and showcase to these stakeholders, the manufacturers, that there is an interest from growers to find end-of-life solutions.
a great question. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time, Jazmine. We really wish you and your family and your father a wonderful birthday, but thank you for joining us. Thanks
Thank
again.
you very much. And the other thing I'll highlight is we have been working with the farm students. So especially for the schools across the Monterey Bay area, you know, the farms program is really unique because it kind of goes along with like FFA, although the student doesn't have to be an FFA or an 4-H, but it provides mentorship throughout their high school years, and then it follows them whether they want to go to a 4-year university or trade school or a college, and it provides scholarships for them as well. So I sit on the My Job Depends on Ag Scholarship Committee. So this funding opportunity goes with the student once they graduate high school. And oftentimes we have students come out and do tours with us. We provide a little bit of mentorship for them, just showcasing the different career opportunities. So yeah, it's always a great program. And if there's any interest in that, I would be happy to share the farms coordinator contact information so that way you guys can share it with your students.
So thank you so much. We really appreciate you, Jazmine. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, at your
Adios.
table,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
at your tables, you have an activity that you can do with your students. And the idea here, oh, thank you. The idea here is that you're going to make a choice, because we are all about making choice. So you're going to select a type of plastic, and then you're going to have a discussion with the folks at your table about what you think the end result of that plastic is. So that's your first part, is just to model the life cycle of your plastic as Jazmine was talking about. Then you're going to notice at your table, you also have smaller components. And these are some of the purposes for the material in the field. And so as we think about creative solutions, our goal here is that you're going to be able to think as a group, well, what might be an alternative? So you've got spaces to do some design challenge problem solving, or that your students would be able to do. And then you can also kind of layer this activity. So, right, you could just think about life cycle of plastic as a place to start. You could think about kind of the purpose and process of those components, but then you could also think about the actual physical materials themselves. So for example, the polyethylene that she was talking about for the drip tape, right? Is there an alternate material that you can think of? There's some really cool research, for example, for the mulch that looks at different carbon components. So it looks at wool as an alternative, or that looks at wood chips or straw. And so those are ways that students can think about, like, oh, is there a different material that a grower would be able to use as a substitute for, say, for example, something like polyethylene. So we'd love for you to take the next 10 minutes and at your table brainstorm. Again, you've got some choice. And so we'll take maybe the last 5 minutes for folks to roam and see what your brainstorming looked like. Are there any questions? Can someone tell me what it is that you are doing?
Organization.
Yeah.
We're like matching the font, these are the things that
Yep.
they use, and
Uh-huh.
these are like the functions that they
Yeah.
allow.
That they serve, and then you've got the materials themselves. So you're doing a systems map. Really what you and your students would be doing is creating a systems map. All right, have fun.
Wait, I was gonna say, actually, when I was about students.
Got that from the Israelis, right?
That's what I was thinking, is I'm like, maybe you would be like, okay, go research here, and they'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's
Like,
like,
how do you get
it's all. Right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not like-
Thank you. That's so kind of you.
We're out after. Yeah.
But I can actually think of like how they think about their Like,
That's my guess.
I don't know, I feel like I'm assuming it's probably a lot thinner.
areas probably bring, so.
They would need a lot of pictures or video.
Material that you
Yeah.
can use for
Yeah.
that, right?
It
Like,
might
oh,
get-
well,
Might go do them up with that.
Okay. Well, you-
September gifts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all around us, yeah. Yeah, they just know it,
Right.
like that, so honestly.
We was
take
having
pictures
another.
around
so
you
the
and-
PvP
and-
Or part of the.
You know, I mean, it would be great if we could get. Reality. Yeah, that, no, perfect world, yeah, but farmers are not.
Yeah.
You know, they are not, they're not gonna let students go out and because it's a fast. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and that does not benefit.
I guess that's.
So, if we do it,
The purpose is for.
looking at plastic, what are our alternatives about creating remote? What is it made of right now?
So.
And then, this is recyclable.
Yeah.
This is.
Was polypropylene, was that anything, right? Was not.
No, not the plastic mulch, the biodegradable mulch.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right. I think PVC is-
Oh,
That's the bill on the-
the hoops, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say. That's what you yeah. And that would be.
I was putting it like here to show like.
Really, the purpose is not to go from
Oh, okay.
the purpose of the, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, or does it increase?
It's way
It also protects plastic.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Well, that's right.
A lot of the things that are.
Yeah.
And then you guys breathe out something.
So is that like, how like, rid of it, throw it in, then you're gonna throw it, okay, we're gonna recycle.
Dump and landfill, which is all about.
Those are like our options.
So this one straight is kind of.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Which one's good?
Some of these things will end up there. So which ones are?
What's that gonna be in the biodegradable?
Oh, yeah,
I would
yeah,
think is very recyclable. I guess. I think high density probably.
Yeah, yeah.
so they are just wireless.
How so? Like.
And the strawberry.
Not quite as.
Like, because
And then also,
It's because of thinking, maybe,
if
like-
we can recycle.
Or it's not like plastic.
You can also add carbon. So it's a line.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know. This is not what it's referring to.
yeah, but yeah, that's correct.
Because maybe the temperature. I would say also. I don't know.
No, the drip tape.
Carbon to the atmosphere. so-
You know, but like with the temp. Like how it's all. I don't know if I'm saying, but.
Yeah.
No,
Oh.
I think.
Run it by a beer too. So extending the.
Like on the side.
Plastic,
Yeah.
right?
The purpose of this activity hopefully was to show you the potential. You can do all sorts of things. I love adding images to this, right? So you could have students generate images associated with this. You could actually have them look at the cost of materials. That's another way that you could tie this in. Say, for example, if you wanted to think about integrating with math. And then the other piece is, I thought this was so brilliant. Jazmine was talking about how they do outreach activities to their community, and their goal is that they want bilingual communication, and they want it to be something that everyone in the community understands the change or the possibility. So I feel like that's a really awesome space for our students too. I want you to have the chance to see what other folks are thinking. So just grab 1 minute of Roman, and then you can head out to lunch.
Any help putting these away?
No, we'll take care of it.
Where are we going for lunch?
I believe
It's gonna be.
Barry will help us with the next step.
Okay, nobody's taking us up.
Yeah, so just roll to see what you think.
Lunch on the roof or?
Okay, so for lunch, so a couple of things before we head off to lunch. First of all, for after lunch, we're going to be you're gonna start brainstorming and working on your projects. So you're welcome to be in either of the two rooms. All we ask is if you're here with a team, so you came with some teachers from your school or your district or something, stick with your team. So it doesn't matter which side you're on, but just stick with your group. We're hoping that you find other teachers and you can brainstorm ideas with each other. So, but also you're just gonna start working on your things, so make sure your team is together. Bring all the announcements here. And
I know, if only there was.
let's see. So lunch will go until about 1:10. So 1:15 is the start of the next session. So if you do happen to